My name is Mandy Lewis, and the morning it all began felt wrong. Not dramatic, not tragic, just off. The kind of quiet that hums beneath your skin, too heavy for a normal Tuesday. I woke up alone. No sound of the shower running, no faint hum of Mark talking to himself while he shaved, no burnt toast smell that always made me roll my eyes. Just silence. Dense, waiting silence. At first, I thought he'd gone out for a run, but when I walked into the kitchen, I froze. There, on the counter, was his favorite coffee mug. Half full, still steaming, and next to it, a folded piece of paper. My heart did that strange, hollow thump, the one that comes before bad news. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, staring at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sunlight was slicing through the blinds, painting the note in pale gold. It looked so ordinary, so deliberate. When I finally unfolded it, I saw Mark's handwriting, neat and sharp, as if he'd thought carefully about every letter. Mandy, I can't do this anymore. I need space. Don't try to contact me. Mark. No apology, no explanation, just those 4 lines. For a few seconds, my mind went blank. Then everything started to buzz. Thoughts, questions, the sheer absurdity of it all. Need space? From what? From me? From us? My eyes flicked around the kitchen. The bowl of fruit we'd bought together on Sunday, the pile of laundry he promised he'd fold, the half-eaten slice of banana bread I baked last night because he said he missed homemade things. It felt like someone had erased him mid-sentence. I reached out and touched the edge of the note. The paper trembled under my fingertips, but my hands didn't. Strangely, I wasn't crying. Not yet. It was as if my body hadn't received permission to fall apart. I read the note again. I need space. Then, almost involuntarily, I let out a small laugh. It sounded sharp. Foreign. Because here's the thing about Mark. He was always the one who took up space. His voice filled every room, his plans filled every weekend, his mood dictated the weather inside our home. And I, quiet, organized, predictable, had always made room for him. I'd made space for his late nights at work, for the missed dinners, for the texts that came hours late with vague excuses, for his need to clear his head every few months on solo trips that somehow always aligned with company retreats. So when he said he needed space, I finally understood. He wanted freedom without consequence. And that's when the stillness inside me shifted. It didn't break. It crystallized. I folded the note neatly and placed it back on the counter, right beside his untouched coffee. Then I walked to the bedroom. Half of his closet was empty. His suits, his watch case, the black leather bag I bought him last Christmas. But his toothbrush was still in the holder. His shoes by the door. A man in 2 minds. The more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't an accident. He had planned this. And in that realization, something inside me steadied. If Mark wanted space, I would give it to him. Not the romantic kind, the legal kind. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed divorce attorney near me. My cursor blinked like a heartbeat. The name that came up first was Evelyn Grace, Esquire. The reviews described her as strategic, precise, and uncompromising. Perfect. Then I called the bank. My voice didn't shake when I said, I believe there's been suspicious activity on our joint account. They froze everything pending review. A small technical lie, but an effective one. By the time I hung up, the silence in the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. Like something new had just begun. I walked back to the kitchen, the note still sitting there, innocent as ever. I slipped it into an envelope, labeled it evidence, and placed it in the drawer where we used to keep travel brochures. Mark always accused me of over-preparing, of having contingency plans for emotions. Maybe he was right. I made coffee, not for him this time, but for me, and sat by the window watching the morning light crawl up the fence. I thought about the past 8 years. The laughter, the arguments, the slow erosion of something I used to believe was unbreakable. Then, quietly, a single thought surfaced. He walked out, but I'm the one who's leaving. By noon, I'd emailed Evelyn Grace's office for an appointment. By evening, I'd transferred my savings into my personal account. When I finally lay down that night, the bed felt unfamiliar, half empty, but strangely peaceful. Mark had asked for space, and I was going to give him all the space he could ever want. I just didn't realize then how fast that silence would turn into 87 missed calls. The first call came on Friday morning, just as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. The name Mark Lewis flashed across my phone screen. The familiar photo of him smiling on a beach in Portugal, staring up at me like a ghost from another life. I didn't answer. I just watched it ring, the sound echoing through the quiet house until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. By the fifth call, I turned the phone face down on the table. I knew that kind of persistence. It wasn't love. It was panic. By the time I finally looked again, there were 12 missed calls and 3 text messages. Mark. Mandy, what the hell did you do? My card's not working. Mark, is this some kind of joke? Mark, call me right now. I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I had expected guilt to creep in, but what came instead was clarity. For years, Mark had managed our finances. I trusted him because it was his thing. He was in marketing, always talking about budgets, growth, investments. I was a nurse. I worked long shifts and trusted that our life was built on honesty. Now I was realizing it had been built on assumptions. Around noon, my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail. His voice sounded different, thinner, frantic. Mandy, pick up, please. This isn't funny. The bank froze our accounts. I can't even pay for my hotel room. What did you tell them? I just needed space, not whatever this is. The word hotel made my stomach twist. He hadn't gone far then. Probably just checked into some sleek place downtown, trying to play the misunderstood husband for a few days before he came crawling back with half-hearted apologies and a bouquet. Not this time. That afternoon, I met with Evelyn Grace in her office downtown. She was nothing like I'd imagined, calm, elegant, with a kind of quiet authority that filled the room. She listened as I told her everything, showing her the note and explaining the frozen accounts. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, tapping her pen against the desk. Legally, she said, he's already abandoned the marriage. That note proves it. If he left without communicating or providing support, it's grounds for filing. She looked me dead in the eye. Do you want to proceed? I hesitated for only a moment. Yes. Evelyn smiled faintly, like she'd been expecting that. Then we'll do this properly. Quietly. He wanted space, you'll give it to him on paper. I left her office with a folder of documents and an odd calmness. It wasn't vengeance, it was logistics. I'd spent too many years walking on eggshells, smoothing over Mark's moods, apologizing for problems I didn't cause. Now, I was done managing his chaos. That evening, I turned off my phone and drove to my sister's house on the other side of town. Are you okay? She asked when I told her everything. I think so, I said, surprising myself. It feels strange. Like I'm watching my own life from outside the window. She nodded. That's what freedom feels like at first. Quiet and weird. When I got home later, I turned my phone back on. 32 missed calls, 7 new messages. Mark, you froze my money, Mandy. That's theft. Mark, we can talk about this, okay? You're overreacting. Mark, you're making a fool of both of us. I just needed some time. That last one made me laugh out loud, a sound I didn't expect. Overreacting? He'd vanished without a word, left a 4-sentence note, and thought I'd just wait politely for his return like a loyal placeholder. By Saturday morning, the tone of his messages had changed. Mark, please, I just need to access my account. My card got declined again. People are asking questions, Mark. Mandy, come on. We've been together 10 years. You can't just cut me off. I stared at those words for a long time. 10 years. A decade of making compromises I thought were love. A decade of listening to him explain why he needed to clear his head every time life got uncomfortable. I typed a reply, paused, and then deleted it. Silence would say more than any words could. That night, as I was brushing my teeth, another voicemail came through. This one was different. Quieter. Slower. Mandy, I messed up. I know that. But you can't just disappear on me like this. Can we meet? Please? I turned off the light and went to bed without listening to the rest. By Sunday afternoon, I counted 51 missed calls. I stopped checking after that. My phone became a metronome of desperation, buzzing at regular intervals until I finally put it on airplane mode. Instead of answering, I went for a walk through the park near our house. The leaves had started to turn and the air smelled like rain. For the first time in a long while, I felt the simple rhythm of my own footsteps. Steady, deliberate, free. Mark was learning what space really meant. He had taken himself out of my life with a note. I was simply taking him out of the details, bank accounts, property, decisions. He thought space was distance. I knew it was separation. When I got home, I checked my email. There it was. Evelyn Grace, petition for dissolution filed. It was official. As I clicked it open, the phone on the counter lit up again. 87 missed calls. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. By Monday morning, the phone had finally stopped ringing. I thought that meant peace, but peace doesn't come that easily. Not when someone like Mark realizes they're losing control. When I opened the blinds, I saw his car parked halfway down the street. The same silver sedan I used to wash on weekends while he sat inside, taking calls for urgent work matters. It sat there like a ghost of our old routines, its presence humming with tension. I didn't panic. Instead, I made coffee. Strong, black. Then I waited. At 9:10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw him. Same pressed shirt, same carefully styled hair, but his face looked deflated. His confidence had leaked out somewhere between the hotel checkout and here. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain on. Mark. He exhaled sharply. Mandy. Finally, his voice used to make my heart race. Now it just made my pulse slow. What do you want? I asked. He frowned. We need to talk. Can you at least let me in? I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. This is ridiculous. I stayed still. You left a note, Mark. 4 sentences and a house key. You made it very clear. He rubbed his temples. I didn't leave. I just needed time. I was suffocating. You know how tense things have been between us? There it was, the same word he'd used 100 times during our marriage. Suffocating. Whenever real life required something of him, empathy, effort, maturity, Mark turned it into an accusation. He stepped a little closer. You froze everything. My cards, my accounts. What were you thinking? That you wanted space, I said evenly. And I gave it to you. He let out a short, humorless laugh. This isn't funny, Mandy. You can't just punish me because I needed a break. You're acting crazy. I felt a flicker of something. Anger, maybe, but it wasn't loud. It was steady, like a candle that refused to go out. Crazy would be pretending this marriage wasn't falling apart long before you left. That made him flinch. Our marriage had started beautifully. We met when I was 27 and he was 30, both ambitious, both convinced that love could outsmart exhaustion. He worked in marketing. I was a nurse. He liked my steadiness, called it grounding. I liked his confidence, mistook it for strength. But somewhere along the way, admiration turned into imbalance. He wanted attention, praise, novelty. I wanted peace, partnership, stability. He'd come home later and later, blaming networking events. When I questioned him, he'd smirk. You wouldn't understand. This is what success looks like. At first, I believed him. Then I just stopped asking. That's how marriages don't explode. They erode. Quietly. Standing at the door now, I saw the full circle of that erosion. I didn't leave to hurt you, he said suddenly. You were cold. Everything had to be structured, perfect. I needed to breathe, to think. Did you find it easier to breathe at a hotel? I asked. His jaw tensed. Don't start. I'm not starting, Mark. You ended it. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair. Look, I made a mistake, all right? I shouldn't have left like that. But freezing the accounts? Filing for divorce? Isn't that extreme? I met his eyes through the narrow gap of the door. Extreme is walking out on your wife with a note. Extreme is expecting her to stay put and wait for you to decide if she's worth keeping. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then his tone softened. His old weapon. We can fix this. We've been through rough patches before. That was true. We'd had arguments that lasted days, quiet wars fought through closed doors and avoided eye contact. But this wasn't a patch. It was an ending. No, I said quietly. We can't. His expression changed, the softness cracking into something sharper. You'll regret this. You think freezing my accounts hurts me? You're just making this uglier for yourself. I smiled faintly. I'm not making it anything, Mark. I'm just making it real. He took a step back, shaking his head like he couldn't quite process losing control. You always need to win, don't you? I almost laughed at that. How blind he still was. It had never been about winning. I just wanted to stop losing myself. I'm done, Mark, I said. Please leave. He hesitated, then turned toward the car. This isn't over, he muttered. The moment his footsteps faded, I closed the door and locked every bolt. My hands didn't tremble. Inside, the house was silent again. But it wasn't the heavy, eerie silence from before. It was lighter, like the air had cleared after a long storm. I sat at the kitchen table, the note still in its envelope, and thought about how we'd gotten here. Not from one bad decision, but from hundreds of small ones. Moments when he lied, and I forgave. Times I shrank myself so his ego could fit the room. Now, there was no room left for that. Outside, Mark's car engine started, then disappeared down the street. And I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the one who'd been left. I felt like the one who had finally walked away. The night after Mark came to the house, I barely slept. Every sound, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, made my chest tighten. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the heaviness that comes when something inside you finally admits, it's over. By morning, I was running on coffee and muscle memory. The house felt cleaner somehow, emptier but easier to breathe in. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Mark had looked at me before he left, like he was hiding something, not just angry about the money. I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop. The thought crept in quietly. What if he'd been hiding things long before the note? Mark had always been territorial about his devices. His phone was for work, his laptop was for clients. At first, I respected that. Trust, after all, was the backbone of marriage. But now, with everything that had happened, that trust felt naive. I remembered his old tablet, the one we used to watch movies on, tucked away in the desk drawer. He hadn't touched it in months. I powered it on. To my surprise, it still connected to our shared cloud storage. And that's when the first crack of truth appeared. The photos loaded slowly. Mark at dinners, conferences, and hotel bars. Some were normal, harmless. Others made my stomach twist. A woman's reflection in a wine glass. A familiar hand on his shoulder in the background of a group shot. Little details that meant nothing alone, but together built a pattern. Her name appeared in a folder labeled Client Meetings. Rachel. I scrolled through the images, Mark and Rachel at what looked like a rooftop restaurant, both laughing, her hand brushing his arm. The timestamp was from 2 months ago. During the weekend, he told me he was at a marketing retreat. I felt my pulse quicken, but my mind stayed strangely clear. The ache wasn't new, it was just finding a name. When you live with someone long enough, you start to sense the emotional drafts. The nights he came home distracted, the perfume that wasn't mine, the sudden bursts of irritation when I asked harmless questions. I had felt it, all of it, but buried it under love and routine. I sat there for a long time, staring at the photo until my eyes blurred. Then I started documenting everything. Screenshots, dates, saved messages. Not out of revenge, out of necessity. Evelyn had told me, emotion gets sympathy. Evidence gets results. By the afternoon, I had a folder titled Documents for Evelyn. It sat on my desktop like a quiet weapon. That evening, my sister called. You sound distant, she said. I'm fine, I lied. Mandy, don't do that thing where you pretend you're made of stone. What happened? I hesitated. I think he's been seeing someone. Her name's Rachel. There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. You always gave him too much credit. You thought if you just worked harder, he'd show up." Her words hit harder than she knew. That had been my pattern: fixing, managing, softening edges that weren't mine to smooth. Mark's affair wasn't the cause of our end. It was the proof of it. After we hung up, I went for a walk. The evening air was sharp, the kind that stings but clears your head. The neighborhood looked exactly the same: kids playing, dogs barking, but everything in my world had shifted. When I returned home, a message notification blinked on my phone. Unknown number. Rachel. "I assume you know? Mark says you froze everything. Maybe it's time to talk like adults." My first reaction was disbelief, then anger. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was irritated, like I had inconvenienced her by existing. I typed a reply and deleted it twice before writing. Me. There's nothing to talk about. You can have the space he wanted. All of it. She didn't respond. The next day, I met with Evelyn again. I handed her the printed screenshots, each one labeled neatly. She looked through them quietly, her eyes scanning quickly, professionally. "This is good," she said finally. "Very good. It shows intent, deception, and financial misconduct. He used marital assets during this affair." I nodded, numb. She leaned forward slightly. "Mandy, I've seen this story 100 times. Men who believe walking out makes them free, but freedom without responsibility is just cowardice." Her words stayed with me. That night, I went into my bedroom. The scent of Mark's cologne had finally faded from the closet. I opened the drawer where I'd kept his note, the one weighted down by the brass house key. I read it again under the warm lamplight. I can't do this anymore. I need space. I smiled faintly, not out of humor, but realization. He had written it as an escape, not knowing it would become his undoing. As I slid the note back into the envelope, my phone buzzed again. "Mark." I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail later, just once. His voice was small. "Mandy, please. Can we talk?" I made a mistake. I was stupid. I don't even know what I was thinking. "Please don't make this harder." I deleted it immediately. The truth had finally come out. Not through confrontation, but through quiet evidence. And as I turned off the light, I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge. I just needed distance. And for the first time since his note, I finally felt like I had it. By the following week, Mark's life began to fall apart, though not because of anything I said or did. It was because, for the first time, I said nothing at all. Silence, I'd learned, is the loudest response you can give to someone who thrives on control. I hadn't heard from him in days when the first call came. Not from Mark, but from a mutual friend, Daniel. He sounded awkward, like someone delivering bad news that wasn't theirs to tell. "Mandy, I don't want to get in the middle of anything," he began. "But have you talked to Mark?" "No," I said simply. He exhaled. "He got suspended from work." Something about client funds not matching up. Apparently, HR started looking into his expense reports after you froze the accounts. I stayed quiet, trying to process that. Suspended expense reports. That meant the networking events he'd always bragged about might not have been business at all. Daniel continued, "Look, I don't know the details, but Rachel was involved somehow. I think she worked for one of the clients. It's messy, real messy." After we hung up, I sat on the couch staring at the blank television screen. The pieces started to fit together. Mark hadn't just walked out because he was unhappy. He'd been cornered. He'd probably hoped to smooth things over later once he figured out how to explain the missing funds. Now the irony was almost poetic. He had written, "I need space," and in doing so, handed me every tool to dismantle the life he built on lies. That evening, Evelyn called to update me. We received a response from his lawyer. They're trying to negotiate a settlement, but honestly, their position is weak. He's admitted to an affair. The financial misconduct doesn't help his case. "What happens next?" I asked. "Next," she said. "We let him come to you. People like Mark always do when they start to lose control." She was right. 2 days later, he showed up again, this time outside my workplace. It was raining, the kind of steady drizzle that makes the world look like it's dissolving. I saw him through the glass doors as I was leaving, his shirt clinging to his shoulders, hair plastered down. He looked older, smaller. "Mandy, please," he called out as I stepped outside. "Just hear me out." I didn't answer. I just kept walking toward my car. He followed. "You've made your point, okay?" I messed up. "But you can't let them take everything. I'll have nothing left." I turned, keys in hand. "Mark, you had everything. You just didn't know how to value it." His face twisted. "This isn't you. You're not cruel." "I'm not," I said softly. "But I'm done being kind to people who confuse it for weakness." For a second, I thought he might cry. Then his tone shifted, the old defensiveness creeping back. "She used me," he muttered. "Rachel. She's the reason work started falling apart. She was supposed to help with the project, but she wanted more. She threatened to tell HR about us unless I—" He stopped. "Unless you what?" I asked. His eyes darted away. "I made some bad decisions. Transferred funds, just to keep her quiet." The words landed heavily between us. "You mean you stole?" I said quietly. He looked at me like I'd struck him. I was desperate, Mandy. "You don't know what it's like to feel trapped?" I let out a hollow laugh. "No, you're right. I only know what it's like to be married to someone who trapped me." He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Go home, Mark. Or wherever home is for you now. You've already done enough damage. I got in my car and drove off without looking back." The rain blurred everything into streaks of silver. That night, I received another email from Evelyn. Update. Opposing counsel is withdrawing. Mark may represent himself. There's also a pending internal investigation against him. Keep any communication records he sends you. I closed my laptop and sat there in silence. Part of me should have felt vindicated. After all, justice was unfolding naturally, without me lifting a finger. But instead, what I felt was something quieter. A sadness not for what I'd lost, but for how little had ever been real to begin with. Later, as I got ready for bed, I noticed Mark's old jacket still hanging in the closet. I took it down, checked the pockets, and found an old movie ticket stub from years ago, our first anniversary. For a moment, I remembered the version of us that used to exist. The laughter, the late-night takeout, the belief that love alone could keep two people safe. Then I folded the jacket, put it in a donation bag, and whispered, "Goodbye." When I turned off the light, I realized something important. Closure doesn't come with revenge or payback. It comes with acceptance, that some people can't love without destroying, and some of us finally learned to stop saving them. And as sleep crept in, I thought of Mark somewhere out there, surrounded by the space he had begged for. He finally had it. 3 months later, the divorce papers arrived by courier. 2 thick envelopes, one for me, one for Mark. I signed my name with a steady hand. No shaking, no hesitation. Just a quiet sense of finality. When I handed the documents back to Evelyn, she smiled faintly. "It's done. The court accepted our petition in full. You're officially divorced, and the property settlement stands." I nodded, exhaling slowly. "So that's it?" I asked. "That's it," she said. "No appeals, no pending claims. He forfeited his share once he admitted to financial misconduct. The house, your savings, your pension, they're yours alone now." For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. Relief, maybe. Or something gentler, like peace pretending to be exhaustion. I left her office and drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like spring, wet earth, and faint lilacs from the park nearby. For the first time in years, I noticed the small things. The sound of children laughing, the rhythm of my turn signal, the feel of sunlight on my arm. It was strange how much space silence could hold when it wasn't heavy anymore. When I got home, I walked from room to room. The house didn't echo the way it used to. I had repainted the living room a soft gray, replaced the sleek furniture Mark loved with pieces that felt warm, lived in. My favorite corner now had a small bookshelf, a cozy chair, and a plant that somehow hadn't died under my care. The house felt like it was finally mine, not because I'd taken it from him, but because I'd reclaimed the air inside it. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out the window. The same spot where I'd once found his note months ago. The brass key still sat in my drawer, untouched since that day. I thought about throwing it away more than once, but I never did. Maybe because it reminded me how quickly a life can pivot on 4 sentences. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello? Silence, then a hesitant breath. Mandy? It was Mark. His voice was thinner, raspier, like life had worn the edges down. I didn't speak. I got your email about the settlement, he said finally. I just wanted to say I understand. You did what you had to do, I waited. I'm leaving town, he added. Going to stay with my brother for a while. Try to figure things out. All right, I said quietly. He hesitated. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to hear your voice one last time. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. There were so many things I could have told him. How much he'd hurt me. How deeply I'd blame myself. How I'd learned that loving someone shouldn't mean losing yourself piece by piece. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Take care of yourself, Mark." He exhaled softly. Yeah, you too. Then the line went dead. I placed the phone down and stared at it for a while. There were no tears, no anger, just quiet acceptance. He had finally gotten the space he asked for. And I had finally learned that space can also mean freedom. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I brewed coffee and took my mug outside to the small patio. The sky was turning soft pink. The world still hushed. For the first time in months, I didn't check my phone. Instead, I thought about what Evelyn had said during our last meeting. Divorce doesn't end a life. It resets it. I realized how true that was. I had spent years being someone's anchor, steady, dependable, predictable, without noticing how deeply that anchor had kept me from moving. Now, the weight was gone. And in its place, there was room for something new. I started taking long walks after work, joined a pottery class, even booked a solo weekend trip to the coast. At first, it felt strange to make plans just for me. But soon, it felt natural. One evening, as I packed for that trip, I opened my desk drawer to grab my passport. There it was again, the envelope marked evidence. Inside, the note and the key. I took them out, read his handwriting one last time, then placed them both into the fireplace. The paper curled slowly, edges blackening, the ink fading into smoke. The brass key glowed faintly before turning dull with heat. Watching them burn didn't feel like revenge. It felt like closure. When the flames died, I whispered quietly, "You wanted space, Mark?" I just found mine. That night, I slept with the windows open. The air moved softly through the room, cool and clean. No ghosts, no unanswered questions. People often say betrayal destroys you, but that's not true. It remakes you if you let it. It strips you down to what's real, then asks what you'll build from there. And I was ready to build. The next morning, I left for the coast with my bag in the back seat, the sun breaking over the horizon. I didn't look back once.